Welcome to Press 4 to Diffuse, your weekly spot for Valorant esports news and discussion. I'm Darth Mike, back from the land of Counter-Strike to join the show once more, and I've got my experts standing by. We got Sam and Ryan here as per the usual. How we feeling today, Sam?
I'm pumped. All right. This past weekend was so ridiculous. Not only for NA, for EU, the shenanigans that went on, the upsets, the absolute memery. I'm so here for it. And I'm looking forward to doing it all over again.
How about you there, Ryan?
I'm doing good. I like the little humble brag to begin us, like, oh, I just came back from casting IEM and Counter Strike. Like, look at this. You did a good job, buddy. Tuned in for a little bit and it was really good. But we're talking about the better tactical shooter, Valorant, today.
Yes.
Ooh,
Yes.
I don't know if I can say those words, but I love both my children equally. We're going to get into it. As you said, it was an exciting week, both for NA and for EU. A lot of events to talk about. We're coming up on the last run of the Challengers series, at least for this first Masters event. There's a whole bunch of action going on. But before we get to all that, we do have some changes coming through in the scene. We've got some roster moves to talk about. So we're going to pop on over there. And most of them came in NA. There honestly wasn't too much movement in EU, little bits and pieces here and there, but for the most part, the big moves came in NA. And the biggest move of all was Android finding a new home. Android is off of Andbox. He's on to NRG, one of the biggest firepower players who did not seem to be having the success that his form would dictate, is now on a new roster. This one is spicy to my eyes. What do we think of it? Start us out here, Ryan.
Sorry, I got blindsided by some literal just news that came out now. Team Liquid dropped Eccles.
What?
I just saw it
Just
on Twitter.
now?
Oh, it
When
actually
I was going to
happened?
retweet the tweet, I saw it and I was like,
Oh my
Lord.
goodness.
All right, we'll talk about Android
Wait,
in
does
a
that
minute.
mean that Sue is vindicated?
Breaking news.
I'm sorry. I was completely like, oh,
What?
okay.
Yampy.
What a weird
Yampy's
time
on
to
the
do
scene.
that.
It's
Well,
good.
apparently, or maybe Yugi's going back into that roster. Anyway, yeah, Unbox NRG. Apparently, Infinite's been dropped in his stead, which is quite funny considering all of the other drama and memes that happened around him this week. So I guess Karma's a little bit of a bitch, to be honest. But it does make me more concerned about Unbox, right? We had Poach leaving, Reba coming in, and then they lose probably their best player in regards to form. Certainly recently, right? Because I do feel that Seb and Boyd have been playing okay, but they've dropped off. It's only Unbox that has been consistently like a top 10 duelist performer, right? So I think it's a
Unbox.
huge, just for North America generally, I meant, but like, yeah, it's a big pickup for NRG, but it's a typical pickup for NRG, just throwing money around, trying to get the best roster they can, and not really sticking with anything.
No, they're absolutely bobbing and weaving. Sorry, Sam, take it away.
I was just giggling because you said unboxing meant Android. Um, I think that the problem with Anbox was less an individual performer issue and more of like an issue of the unit itself. And I'm not a coach, I'm not an analyst. I couldn't tell you exactly what would need to be fixed to sort that one out, but I think that each individual player has a lot of powerhouse potential and it just wasn't being reached.
I think that,
Android moving over to NRG, I think that's a pretty big level up.
yeah, it should definitely set him up better to perform. It's going to be a little interesting to see the roles since Android's used to being towards the top of the board, and that's not really what
Mhm.
Infinite was consistently doing for them. He was more the reliable late lure clutch type role where they would bring him in and try and make him clutch that out. But I am curious to see the role shift. He is a distinct. I want to say firepower upgrade. The thing with Infinite is Infinite's always been a very smart player where he's always had that massive potential and you've always seen it. It's always been things outside of the server, as we saw from him the last couple of weeks, that have distracted and derailed his career at points. And it's really unfortunate, but the moral of the story is if you're a pro contracted to an organization, don't be a douchebag on the internet. It's really not that
Easier
hard.
said than done, apparently.
It's
Dude.
really not that hard. Just don't do it.
I've
You'll keep your job
I've been
much better.
laughing at like some I wouldn't call them pros. There are some players that are like trying to be in the scene, and this specifically happened with. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but obviously, Valorant just announced the VCT Game Changers, the All Fem League that's coming out, and some guy made some really, really awful misogynistic comments, and he ran it back within about 2 minutes, and he like tweeted his apology, and it's like, it's too late now, buddy. You're trying to go pro. You need to filter yourself before you do the dumb,
There's a
not after.
there's a great Mike Birbiglia stand-up special titled "What I Should Have Said Was Nothing," and he has this whole bit
Yeah.
about how at so many points in his life, what he should have said was nothing. And I think a lot of these people could learn from that, to say the least. But we'll move on from that bit of news. Do we want to just talk about the Liquid news now? Because I do think that's
Yeah.
so spicy.
Yeah. So I will read out what the tweet says. I don't know if we have it on hand because it literally just came up now. Team Liquid Valorant said, "We are making a change to our team in the upcoming tournament. Eccles will be removed from our active roster. Stay tuned for more info on our new player." So now that I'm sort of reading it again, it could be just for this part of challenges, we're going to try it with somebody else. The rumor is that it could be Jampy, it could be Yugi, who's also been scrimming with the team. I know that Eccles has not been performing very well, but I still really don't like this move. I think taking out an RGL for another big hitter and hopefully another fragger, yeah, works on paper, but there's just so much when you're actually in the server that you don't see. You don't see on the scoreboard that Eccles would be doing for that team. It could be a great move for Team Liquid, don't get me wrong, but I can definitely see this making Team Liquid look a little bit worse in the short term at least.
Looking at this from a purely unanalytical perspective, I'm not talking about the team, I'm not talking about how they perform. I just feel really bad for Eccles because he's been getting so much heat over the last few months from everyone, from the viewers, from other players, I'm going to say it, from the desk. And I think that it's going to be really tough, or this whole thing will have been really tough for him after getting all of that and now being put onto inactive. Whether or not this is the right decision for the team is its own, its own conversation. But from like just kind of a human perspective, oh man, I really feel for the guy. Whew.
I'll speak to
That's
the other side of the coin, perhaps, which is what Liquid could be adding. I'm going to assume that they're bringing in Yampi. That's the most recent rumor I've seen. Obviously, it could be Yugi. No offense
Bringing
to...
in an Opper.
Yeah,
I
they're
think.
bringing in an Opper.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
offense to Yugi. That would be an odd decision to me just because it seems like his moment has passed and he kind of needs to rebuild up his career and his credibility in both scenes. But Yampi was and is an incredibly talented young star who was limited from opportunities in Counter-Strike because of a VAC ban from when he was 13. So the sky's the limit for him as a player. Obviously, the VAC ban's not a limitation anymore. He's got a huge amount of potential. I think it's really a sweepstakes kind of thing of adding him to your team. Now, specifically adding him for Eccles, yeah, who's going to call now? Who's going to set players up? I think they might see a drawback as a whole to that roster from removing one piece, but Yampi is a good piece to pick up. I also do want to say I'm wearing one of the Liquid Naruto shirts. Just got this in the mail
I'm
yesterday.
so jealous.
So
what?
I feel like I brought this news
Dude.
upon us with my clothing choice, with my weeb clothing
NA
choice.
only clothing.
You
Get
must do.
out.
I ordered one
I'd
of
be
the...
So tilted
interested.
about that.
Oh, God.
Just real quick on Eccles as well. There's not that many vocal IGLs in Europe, so I do think that Eccles could go somewhere else. I'm not quite sure what team he'd fit in for. I would expect he'd get picked up somewhere else, but question is where at this point.
Guild. A team that needs direction and has been underperforming.
Yeah.
Guild.
British Org as well.
Yeah, it just makes a lot of sense. The dots are being crossed. The
Pieces
T's
are
are
falling
being dotted.
together.
We'll talk about some other changes that maybe have been a long time coming here. We're going to head back to NA. We're going to talk about Complexity here. Complexity have finally made a big change. They benched XB3, who was with the roster from the get-go. They benched Sharky as well. They're going to be trialing Valen and Brock for Challengers 3. Valen as well will apparently be calling for the roster, so that is a big trial coming through. What do we make of this? Is this the silver bullet to finally get Complexity Valorant on track here? Sam, why don't you start us out?
We talk about this a lot when teams make really drastic changes so close to a qualifier, and we talk about how the roster generally needs time to set. It's very seldom that you will come in guns blazing right off the bat and just win everything. We saw it happen that one time at Bandcamp with Anbox, their very first tournament. They came out the gate and they absolutely demolished everyone. It was, of course, there were a few teams missing from that tournament, and since then they've kind of tapered off a little bit. But again, that kind of really strong, surefire start is I wouldn't put money on it, right? I think that there's a lot of potential there, which I've just now discovered is my favorite word in the whole world on this podcast. There's a lot of
It's a
potential
crutch
there.
word.
Honestly,
We all
but
have them. We all have
the
them.
worst part is that it's true, though. They're really good players, but how well do they play together? Who the hell knows? Only Complexity does, and we're not going to know anything until they actually get onto the server. And I'm not going to be putting my money on it until I actually see them.
Ryan?
I think Complexity is a team that has talent, obviously. Jonah P, I think, is still on trial for this team. I remember in First Strike, he had some really good games in the tournament prior. The issue is how do they correlate if it's an update or not? They're in a bracket with TSM for this final challenges, or at least of this section of the calendar, if you want to call it that. So, I mean, I guess they're just hoping to go in, beat, shut up, potentially make their way up and see how they do. So I think Complexity's dropped off quite a lot. It's been really difficult to keep an eye on how realistically they're doing because they're not even on stream quite a bit. So it's a tough one for them to work out. But if they think this is the direction they want to go in, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think change was necessary. It just remains to be seen. I think changing calling as well was good because we always saw them underperforming our expectations for them. So that's a smart direction to approach, but yeah, it might be a little bit of time before that happens. We do have one org picking up a new team in Valorant. That's Noble, who've entered the scene. They picked up that Phoenix 1 roster, which was another situation of players getting scummed by an org that wasn't real, that sort of disappeared and dropped off. But Noble now has the team. I can confirm Noble is a real org, not a bedroom org, not somebody pulling a scam. They are a real organization, so that's exciting for these players. The name that's most interesting to me on this roster is Zekin, because he's 15 and apparently nuts. Just looking at the people who are happy to see him get picked up by an organization, it's clear that there's talent here. And so that might be a name to watch as we're coming forward. Anyone? I don't have that much perspective on this roster, to be quite frank. Anyone know a little bit more about them?
Absolutely not.
Not a thing.
I think as well, when you have a
Apart from
15-year-old
the
player.
Scammers. Go on.
I was just going to say, if you've got like a 15-year-old player, then we're not going to be seeing them in challenges, right? Because you need to be 16. So it's cool, but we might not really get to see many tournaments with them playing. But it does give them an opportunity to, scrim and just improve, right? It's a long-term team if they're picking up 15-year-olds.
Yeah, one for the
All right,
future.
some information from Anders. Zekin is apparently the, I quote, maddest young FA Sover in NA. And I think that coming from Anders probably says something. So I'm going to throw that word in again, potential. But yeah, we got to wait until he actually comes of age and they can start performing into the big tournaments. But that doesn't mean we can't kind of look out for them in the smaller tournaments, right? There's still like monthlies, then weeklies that go on in NA. And I think if we have the opportunity, we could possibly stick an eye out. Although there's so much Valorant content to consume, it would have to be kind of like a fringe thing. Like, oh, look.
With
15 minutes,
2 rounds.
we're 15 minutes in and we haven't even started talking about it all yet. So strap yourselves in. It's another 1 hour episode.
Oh yeah, always. Also, I just want
this
to
is
take
now
a
a
moment.
1 hour show.
Stick an eye out. Is that the saying where you're from? That sounds like you're gonna blind yourself.
I don't know.
All
Let's
right.
poke an eye out. Come on.
Poke an eye out or keep an eye out is what I think you were going for. But
I mean, is
stick
keep an eye out
sounds
any
violent.
better? I'm just gonna take my eye out and keep it here.
We'll move on from this. I've derailed us completely. We're into the events now. We're going to talk about EU to start. And obviously there's 2 stages to this because the EU tournaments run back to back. The open is the closed, is just challengers is one big thing. It just kind of keeps going. So let's talk about it. From the open stage, we had some big surprises. We had some crazy results. Start us out here, Ryan. Start us down the path.
Yeah, I mean, we could sort of sum up some of these games quickly because they obviously go into the closed part and play it again. Main one being Alliance. They beat Defuse to qualify for the closed section, but they beat Team Liquid to get there in 2-1 fashion with a 13-1 win on Icebox. Probably one of the reasons why I think Team Liquid were looking to make moves. They went out of challenges in a bracket that really should have been theirs, especially when you look at the fact that eventually closed up, it was going to be playing up against Wave. Really wasn't excuses on why they didn't make it, but Alliance clearly showing us that they have potential, not necessarily reinventing the wheel necessarily, but they're very good at picking up certain compositions, strategies. They know how to play the game and very good at going, oh, that looks cool. That works. Let's try this. So they're just very good at adapting. And with the players that they have, their fundamentals are incredibly solid.
Sam?
I mean, yes to all of the above. Like, when we did our predictions, I was like, Liquid, they went out the bracket, easy peasy, no contest. And Alliance were like, hold my beer. And they did exceptionally well, way better than any of us would have expected. I knew that they had a good roster. I expected them to take a little bit more time for that roster to settle, but they've proven me wrong. And with Mitch at the helm, I'm not completely surprised at that happening. I think that they've done phenomenal work, and I'm looking forward to the Masters.
I do want to ask about, because I think we should just go ahead and get into the closed fairly quickly, because that's where it really gets interesting. But before we do, I do want to ask you about Chakalaka, because I know you're excited about them, Sam.
Ooh.
So I'm going to let you take this here. Tell us a tale of Chakalaka.
All right. Chakalaka is an all Polish team who kind of came out of nowhere. I don't think anyone was really expecting anything. There've been a couple of Polish teams recently that have been performing quite well. The other one was Meisterstick. I think that's how you pronounce it. As someone who lives in Poland, you'd think I would know that, but no idea. I can tell you it translates to masterpiece. So there you go. But there's two Polish teams that have been performing exceptionally well. Chakalaka exceeded, I mean, no one had expectations. So to say that they exceeded expectations is definitely an understatement. They blew everyone out of the water. The one player, now termed phone number, because no one can be bothered to learn all the separate numbers in his name, performed ridiculously well. Kind of reminiscent of Pora back in the old was it
Prodigy
Ignition?
days, yeah.
Way back in day, and everyone was looking at it going, yo, is he sus? Is he for real? Like, what's happening here? And I don't know, maybe it's just pure raw talent. Pora proved it. He wasn't cheating. He was just insanely good. There's some question marks, but I think that I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. This is a, massive tournament. I don't think that anyone really intelligent goes into this kind of thing actually thinking they can get away with cheating. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to say I'm looking forward to seeing them perform again, because for them to have come this far, kind of huge.
Well, let's talk about the close here. We've gotten our Chakalaka dose. We're into the closed. We've got our first 4 teams to Masters in the EU. Alliance, NIP, FPX, Heretics. I think Alliance is the big surprise. We've already touched on a little bit of what this roster is, what they're coming through, but it's an incredible result. I mean, I think it blew Banks and Mitch away. We saw them post their public responses to it and that kind of thing. This was a project that people were looking at for the long term as they were picking up the roster, as they were rumoring. Everyone kind of had their suspicions about this, but now they've made the Masters. They've justified the project right away. That's a hell of a good return on investment. That's I think a lot of other orgs are looking at that with envy, going, well, okay, that's a pretty nice debut. That's a pretty nice one. Then we've got NIP, FPX, Heretics. Any shockers here? Sam, why don't you start us?
Shockers? So we've already covered Alliance. Apart from that, no, not really. NIP 2-0ing G2 was less of a surprise because they've already done it once before. So you come into it, you don't expect them to do it again. You kind of think, oh, well, this is going to be like Sentinels. They're just going to, they've lost one time. They're going to turn it around. They're going to win it out. NIP come back, and just like that scuffed Goofy meme, they're like, I'm going to fucking do it again. And they did. 2-0 in a very, very strong fashion there to get themselves into the Masters bracket. So I wouldn't call that a surprise or an upset per se. Let's face facts here. NIP are a fantastic team. We need to acknowledge that. But it was definitely like it could have gone either way. Let's put it that way. Aside from that, no, I wouldn't say there's any surprises.
Ryan, were you shocked by anything?
I think, yeah, like NIP winning G2 again is fine. It's certainly capable of happening, but I think the shock of it was how dominantly they did it. They did it in 2-0 fashion. G2 didn't have a read on the game at all. FPX versus Fnatic, I think certainly going into this and the trends, you were sort of expecting Fnatic to struggle a little bit. FPX have not had a fault at all so far in challenges. So the fact that they did it in pretty strong fashion is a good sign. Fnatic did take bind in the series. It did go to the full best of 3, but the other maps in the pool is just something that FPX is much better at. And a little bit of a concern for Fnatic, to be honest. I think their map pool isn't looking as comprehensive as you're hoping. And honestly, the 2-0 with Heretics beating OG didn't really keep up to pace with what Heretics were trying to do. But in all honesty, they did have some good stuff, some really good executes. They had some really nice ideas, but it is nice to see the Heretics with their full 6-man roster, with Rubino coming in, have that comprehensive playbook that you're hoping to see. I have no doubts about this team being as good as people are expecting them to be again.
I like to see that.
This closed. Sorry, just to jump in
Go
one
for it.
second. It feels kind of like a story of redemption arcs. If you look at Alliance, Fearoth, and Lucca, there's like some serious vindication there after, you know, being dropped from however many teams in the past. They've now made their way into the Masters series. And then you look at FPX Fnatic. Now, FPX were always on top. But you could see it as somewhat of a fall to them losing out to Fnatic, then known as Summon FC during First Strike. So a little bit of a redemption arc, a little bit of a revenge arc, I suppose, for them to beat out Fnatic to take that spot in the Masters. Yeah, that was my only comment there. Life is an anime, so I felt I had to make the parallels.
Well, we'll wrap up the EU side of things with a bow. I think, look, there's a lot more teams in the hunt for those master spots. I think G2 in particular are going to be starting to feel the pressure here, which is going to make things somewhat interesting. There's a few of those rosters that expect to be in that will be really disappointed if they can't make it through, but there's only so many spots. There's only so many attempts. Speaking of only so many spots, we're going to head on over to NA, where we had a few teams qualify through to find those Masters spots. I want to start it out by just saying, how about them Envy boys? How about Envy? Because you guys know, I've been on the Envy train for a long time now. Big Envy fan. This was the tournament where it felt like they finally looked like they should have looked in every tournament for the last half a year. Agree, disagree? Ryan, take us away.
Yeah, like I had my concerns about Envy. Envy are always a team that start to look really good in going into a tournament, and then like First Strike, for example, some of the previous tournament qualifiers, they kind of fall off a little bit and don't perform as well as they should. They also change around who's playing the Omen. Caboose, Food, and Mummy have all had a go. Mostly it's been Mummy throughout this tournament, and Food was just unlocked. He was the MVP of the whole tournament, one of the most standout players, and they got to beat Sentinels twice, a team that they were 8-0 against. They never beat these guys up until this tournament, and they did it in really exciting fashion. I mean, Sentinels did well to come back through the losers bracket to get a second place, but this is, again, sort of a reminder how good Envy can be. The question is, now that they're in Masters, can they keep that form going? Or is it going to be like the First Strike finals? Are they going to just sort of dip out with a bit of a whimper?
I've felt for some time that they've been on an upward trajectory, and I've kind of spoken about that quite a lot on previous episodes as well. You know, once they added their, it was Food and Crashies, once they joined the roster, like, things just escalated to like ridiculous levels. It was like when Sean joined Gen G, and then it like started to create that curve, and then I forgot the newest player on Gen G. I remember raving about him last week. Kusta. Freaking hell, man. Like, the difference that one or two players can make. So Envy have been on that upward trajectory for some time now, and it's really, really awesome to see them having finally reached that goal of beating Sentinels not once, but twice. But Sentinels, I don't get them, right? They confuddle my brain because every episode I come on and I talk about how, well, Sentinels are kind of trailing off. We see it every tournament. They get smacked out of the loser bracket. They have to fight their way back up, and they do it, and then they get to the winner bracket only to lose again. And I can't get a beat on them because this is like a 50K tournament. You don't, this isn't a seeding thing. Like, you can't just be like, oh well, whatever, it's seeding. No, it's $50,000. Like, why do you not care about winning? I don't get it.
I do want to say, just for some context for this particular tournament, I think it is important to make a note of the situation that a lot of players were dealing with, where for the last week before this tournament, they didn't have power. They may not have had running water. A lot of these players play from Texas. I know all of Envy is in Texas. I know all of Sentinels is in Texas as well, I believe. A lot of these players, a lot of these rosters are based in Dallas, are based in Austin, because it's becoming a bit of an epicenter for esports. And the reality is, they were up the creek without a paddle for the last week. They couldn't practice. They were trying to get running water. You know, I'm willing to give rosters a little bit of a, okay, as long as you made the master spot, that's fine. That's fine. You know, it is an extreme circumstance. And I know we've had Sentinels have those a few times in the past, but this was an extreme circumstance, I will say.
Yeah.
Still, they did get
I
brought
mean,
to the
Although
final.
for Envy to have come out on top
Yeah.
with the same stuff, like you got to give them mad props for that one.
I do think that in defense of Sentinels, certainly the final, Envy start 1-0 up because they came through the winners bracket. The Haven game was relatively close, but Envy just ran away with the first half and Sentinels had to do damage mitigation to bring it close. And then the final map was Bind, the map that they typically ban out, but because it's a best of 5, they can't do that. So it did work out well. If that Haven game went Sentinels' way, then I think we would have gone the distance. It really is map pull for these guys. And just some of the maps like Icebox, Split, those ones that Sentinels have been so well known on, don't look as convincing as they used to because they're still trying to work it out. They're still trying to get around the meta. And if I may, to transition onto a team that isn't part of Texas, in fact, they've got quite a bit of ping away with 100 Thieves. The fact that they didn't qualify kind of concerns me a little bit. I mean, they do play up against Sentinels in a qualifying game, but Sentinels, we've seen them adjust to this new meta, if you could call it that, the playstyle LG and Xset play. 100 Thieves didn't look comfortable with that at all. Not only does Sentinels know how to play against it, but he also played it against 100 Thieves in this series, and 100 Thieves didn't really have as many answers as you were maybe hoping to see from them.
That is a very good one to point out. I do have just one last note on Envy, which is I feel like they've struggled against two teams primarily, and it is Sentinels, and then to a lesser degree, Xset as well has always given them a bit of fits. So I was super happy to see them take series wins over both rosters, just to kind of put it together. But I think you're absolutely right about 100 Thieves. They're a team that we expect to be in the top, right? They were the first strike winner.
Yeah.
We look at them, we look at the pedigree of some of the players on there, and then the explosive potential of their young talent as well. And we say this should be a top team in the region. And I don't think there's any real excuses for that. We know they have all the support. We know they've got a million different coaches who like to sit in the background of their games. We know they've got, facilities. They're being given the opportunities. Like, this is a team that should be in the top. And you're right. It is very disappointing for them to miss out. One more chance, though. One more chance.
Last chance saloon.
Last chance saloon. I thought Gen G was a little disappointing in this bracket.
Yeah.
Which is a bummer because we had come to have such high hopes for them and they've just been growing and growing and growing. I still think that a little bit more time. I'm curious to see how they do it here in the Challengers 3 close when we get to it. I think they have a very good chance of booking one of those last 4 master slots, but they're a team that came off meeker here than they had been so far.
I think the one caveat to that, obviously, so in the winner bracket, they lose out to Immortals, who wind up coming in 3rd in the entire tournament. And in the loser bracket, they go out to 100 Thieves, who did go out fairly early, but they went out to Sentinels. If they didn't meet up with Sentinels, maybe they make a little bit further along in the bracket. So, yeah, they get knocked out really early, but I also think that the opponents they had were somewhat difficult. Not an excuse, though. I'm right there with you. I was expecting a lot more from them. So, big disappointment from both them and 100 Thieves.
I think the reality as well is at this point in the brackets, when we're talking about it, there's only 4 more spots in Masters, right? There are 4 more spots. You're always going to have a tough run there towards the end. It is a tough bracket. If you want to be in this Masters event, you need to be one of the 8 best teams in the region. And you can't have a bad day. You can't have a tough bracket draw. You're going to have to get through it regardless. If 100 Thieves aren't making it, well, and you can't beat 100 Thieves, tough shit. You're not getting through.
Yeah.
It is really damn hard to make these events in the current format. It is brutal. And it's going to leave a lot of teams rallying and sort of figuring out their expectations. Do we have any other parting thoughts on this close bracket? LG, talk about them, Ryan.
Yeah, so they beat 100 Thieves for 1 in a best of 3. It was super cool. They lost to Immortals to go down to the losers bracket and then got 2-0'd pretty dominantly by Xset. Now, somebody pointed this out before, and quite a while ago, Xset always had LG's number. I think it was like the Renegades tournament, everything prior to the Winter Championships. Xset would beat LG like 13-2, 13-3 on certain maps. And then we saw this ascension from LG where not only were they able to beat Xset, but they then went on to win the Winter Championships tournaments by beating the likes of Sentinels. It was the first time that we really saw the true potential of this roster. It's interesting to see things kind of come full circle a little bit here. I didn't expect Xset to be able to win up against LG, 2 teams that have been dominating the headlines, I suppose, on NA Valorant because of their playstyle and this info-stealing, high-contact way of playing. I am a little bit concerned from LG. I still think they should qualify for the next one, considering they have a free pass into Challengers Free closed anyway. But as we saw from this bracket, if you run into the wrong people, you could easily sit there and go, all right, LG deserve it, 100 Thieves deserve it. If they run into each other, what can you do, right? Only one team is able to qualify. It's not as dreamt up, I suppose. The bracket can be a bit of a bitch in these kind of scenarios.
It really can. It's brutal. Now I mean, all right, I'm gonna talk about looking forward. We'll talk about NA Challengers 3, which is coming up. It's starting tomorrow night, folks. In just a little bit, we're gonna touch on that briefly. We will also this is a cool thing. We're gonna be recording a pre-show for each day of the Challengers series. So you'll get to see our beautiful faces right before that action goes live. We'll be breaking down the matchups that are up to come. We'll be breaking down some of the games that have already happened once we're later in the tournament, that kind of a thing. But for now, I want to talk about one other initiative that came through that was super cool that was announced yesterday, and that's the Game Changers program from Riot. That was announced just yesterday. It's an awesome program. It's an initiative aimed at promoting access for women and other marginalized genders in the Valorant space. It's divided into two programs, basically. There's the series events and there's the academy events. The series events are top flight events on par with, say, the Ignition series events that we had before. So probably around a $50,000 prize pool, something in that range. And that's designed to find the best of each region. They'll be in different regions around the world. And then meanwhile, we've also got the academy events, which are monthly tournaments in partnership with Galorants to give grassroots opportunities for competition. This is, to my eyes, an awesome idea. Sam, you want to give us your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to cast the FTW Ignition Series event, which of course was the women's only Ignition Series event back in September last year.
Yeah.
And it was phenomenal. Yes, as is to be expected, unfortunately, when you have all women events, there was a bit of vitriol in Twitch chat. But I must say that the vast majority of the feedback and the comments that were coming through was just support and like love and hype and happiness, and it was amazing. And then another event that I did about a month ago or so was the Huntress Trials with Rix GG, and this was done in association with British Esports, and also female only event, and surprisingly enough, zero vitriol. It was just pure love and light, and the support that these women gamers and marginalized gendered gamers have for one another is massive. And I think that if you give them the space to be able to show that, then you're going to achieve exactly what this tournament sets out to achieve. And that is to create spaces where women feel comfortable to step out, to compete, and to be part of the community. Because women don't shy away from competing because they're not good. They shy away from competing because the space is unsafe. I don't want this tournament to be a permanent, perpetual, ongoing thing where we kind of create this segregated league of you have the VCT men's and the VCT women's, you know? But I want it to be a springboard to create those safe spaces, to help educate the rest of the community, and to get us to a place where we can have those mixed teams. Evil Geniuses is on the right track with their team. Entropic as well have a female player. So we've got to step in the right direction. Just that little bit of an extra nudge from Riot. I love it. Big thumbs up. Also, hire me.
Ryan, thoughts? I had to get the personal connect in there.
I mean, like,
Obviously.
I think when you, like, the main thing is tactical shooters, Valorant, Counter-Strike are intimidating for everybody. More so, certainly those from marginalized genders and being women. It's a nice thing that they've done before. It's nice to see Riot expand on it. Having somebody like Anna sort of lead in the line, not only for this space, but the game overall. It's important to them, not only with tournaments like this, but in the actual game as well, with a lot of the abuse stuff that they've kind of spoke about, making sure that the tools are much better in game to stop kind of people, you know, talking shit at each other and be generally dickheads, right? But it's a nice thing. I'm happy to see more of it for sure, and kind of everything that Sam said, right? Like, I think that with Cloud9 White coming in and Evil Geniuses, yeah, sometimes when those announcements go through, people can be pretty horrible about it. But the main thing is that people have got used to Cloud9 White. But the majority of, like, the subreddit, for example, super supportive of all of those teams as well. And, you know, people like Mel have become a standout ambassador of the community in a competitive sense. Nobody really sees the gender that way. So it's really good. It's nice to see that kind of thing coming through.
I think that one of the cool things as well about this program is you can clearly see how much of an impact that FTW event back in September had. I think it was because that was an independently organized event that Riot then threw their support behind to make an Ignition Series event, and the feedback was clearly so positive that they're like, all right, how do we keep this going? And from that event, you can draw two teams that are now pro teams that have their roots in that event. That was Team Magical got picked up by Cloud9 White as a direct result of that event. If you think any otherwise, I don't know. That was a huge amount of exposure for them. And then EG, that was Hamburgers. That's where Potter and Claudia got into it. That's where Potter decided she wanted to get back into competition. That's where her connection with Claudia came in as well. So that's you got roots from that team there as well. So it shows that this kind of exposure, this kind of opportunities works to get people opportunities in pro rosters. Period. That works. Second, it's just a great way to expand the scene, and it makes business sense from Riot as well. If they expand the audience of Valorant, if they make it more accessible to women and marginalized gender, if they give them role models to look to try and pursue being pro, then guess what? That's a lot more people playing the game. That's a lot more people buying your ridiculous skins, spending beaucoup de bucks on them. Like, it's just smart business. Women are a valid audience for gaming. They're a great audience for gaming. The more people who are involved, the better. If you love something like we love Valorant, like so many people love Valorant and gaming in general, why wouldn't you want to share that with more people? Why wouldn't you want more opportunities for people to get involved? I particularly love the fact that they're doing academy events as well, because at the grassroots, that could be one of the most intimidating junctures. I know people always talk about it where they're like, well, the top of the pro scene isn't that sexist, or the top of the pro scene's like pretty welcoming, but getting there is a bitch. It's brutal.
That's the main thing.
Joining random matchmaking games, people are threatening your life. It's terrible. There was a great tweet from Katsumi that I want to highlight, where she said it was, she was mocking the response to this announcement of just leave gender out of it. She said, I wish I could have told that to all the men who excluded, harassed, and threatened me since I started playing FPS games at 13 years old. Getting to the point where you even have a thought about making the pro scene is what's a nightmare if you're if you're from an excluded community. That's the reality of it. So I love it. I'm here for it. I'm here for it all the way. I think we should probably move on, talk about Challengers 3. We're actually doing well on time for once. We're only 40 minutes in. We're coming up on the end. I just everyone give yourselves a pat on the back real quick.
We're doing well. We're doing it. I think the main thing as well, just to sort of quickly jump on that as well, is just people have vitriolic response to the fact that this is like a flagship event. We kind of need those flagship events to normalize it, right? It's kind of what I said before about the announcements of Cloud9 White and Evil Geniuses. You get used to it. And that's the main thing, is just getting used to women in esports, just overall. And unfortunately, that takes time and a lot of resources sometimes to get people going with it. But it's nice to know that Riot very much care about that and are willing to put money and resources behind it to make sure that it flourishes.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
So Challengers 3. Challengers 3 is coming up. We're going to be talking about it all weekend in our pre-shows, but I do want to just touch on it a little bit here. It's the last chance to make the Masters. We're going to have 100 plus teams, and there are 4 spots at the end of it to make this Challengers closed event. And from there's only 4 spots beyond it. This is such a minuscule opportunity. This is such a brutal storyline to fight through this bracket where there are no second chances, to try and get in just for a shot at the big show, right? Like this is crazy. So I want to ask you questions, and my primary focus here, I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of the bracket because that's what we'll do in the pre-show. Who cannot afford to lose here? Give me a name. Sam, start us.
Just one, TSM. We kind of touched on them a little bit. They have so much to prove right now. Whew.
Yeah.
Just keeping it short.
Ryan, thoughts on TSM?
TSM more than anything, right? Like quickly looking through the bracket, you've got Spot Up, Complexity, Version 1, and Rise being the main teams that could potentially qualify in their stead. TSM should be beating them. They lost to a really informed Gen G, and it was a really good game. Gen G weren't able to sort of follow that form going into close. So really, it's just a case of TSM kind of getting over that loss and then go in again for this final time. If they go out, when you look at this kind of pretty weak bracket overall. I mean, you've got Version 1 that could potentially do a lot, but still a new team. Everything else, though, it's hard, right? You could say Ambox, you could say NRG. They're both part of the same bracket. One of the brackets is super open with RNG, Evil Geniuses, Sedated, Beast Curse, Built by Gamers, Elysium. potentially Cloud9 Blue as well, I think is another team that would want to do well. They've got Ghost in their bracket, Carpe Noctem, E United, and T1. So I think Cloud9 versus T1 could be a really interesting matchup if we get there to qualify, considering all of the different roster moves that these two teams have had. But TSM is definitely the one where you've got a pretty open bracket. Don't screw it up.
Yeah. I'm going to ask one more question about TSM as well. If they don't make the closed challengers event,
you got to make roster changes.
Something's got to give, man.
I don't know what you do. That's the thing, though. Like, who do you draw? I mean, Twitch chat's going to give me a million different answers, but realistically, like, you've got players that you could look at, like Cutler and Hayes potentially, but there's a lot of stuff that they do that you will not see in stats, right? And so it's really difficult to make that call. Sabros has been experimenting by playing a bit more Sky. I think a little bit of Yoru and Scrims as well, they were saying. So I think that they can't afford to screw this up, but I have no idea what they do if they fall flat, honestly.
It's difficult to tell. Honestly, and this might be a hot take, but I see a situation where they pull 100 Thieves. They take one person, they scrap the rest, and they start from the beginning.
Who would
I
be
see
your
a world
one?
where it happens.
Who would be your one?
Probably Wardell. That might seem really, really like cliche and dumb, but I feel like for all of the missteps that I see him make, his clutch moments are phenomenal. And I feel like sometimes it balances out and sometimes it just weighs a little bit more heavily than the missteps. So I think, and again, I did mention I'm not an analyst, I'm not a coach, but if I was doing this, I would probably stick with Wardell, scrap the rest, start from scratch.
Wow.
There's another person that I can think of, and I don't necessarily agree with this mindset, but I could see people coming for Tailored. I could see when you have these kind of players on your roster, all of which are very good in their general areas, that people just go for the coach because it happens naturally, right?
Yeah.
That they're the first port of call, even in Counter-Strike when things don't start to go well. So I feel that they've been unlucky running into Exet, running into Envy, both of which qualified for Masters eventually. You can't really fault them too much. They beat Dignitas in pretty handsome fashion. I'm going to miss them in this tournament, to be honest, because they're not playing in it with Rara and Ryan coming in. They actually look like a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
I think they could have qualified for close depending on the bracket. But yeah, I'm concerned about TSM to an extent, but I still think that they should make closed. They should. They really, really should.
They really
Come on
should.
now.
I think the other one that absolutely should, that I don't think there's any excuses for, I think their one sort of gimme excuse is that they just brought in a player, but that player should be an upgrade. That's the whole idea. NRG. I don't think NRG can afford to miss out on the closed tier. I think that if they do, they have to take a really hard look at that roster and go, okay, we've been throwing money at this. We've been working different players in here. We've been picking up a bunch of big names. What's not working? What isn't here? What isn't clicking for the team?
Cloud9.
Do you think so? I think it's still early enough.
I feel like this is
if it's
a team
early
that has
enough
a
for
lot
them,
to
why isn't it
prove,
early
though.
enough for NRG? Like,
Because
if they're
it's
picking up
One
Android
Piece.
and Android's playing in this tournament,
I guess.
No.
I guess.
I think given the last few months and just how much has happened in the last few months, it's been like a little bit of a roller coaster for C9. And at some point, like, people are losing faith. I'll say it, I've lost faith, but people are losing faith. And this is one of those things where it's like, they need to make something happen. They need to reassure their fans and everyone that, yes, they're still in this. They still have skin in the game. And in that sense, so not thinking about how many players they've swapped or whatever, but just looking at a very broad, seeing the name C9 and a whole lot of zero whatevers, they need to reassure people. They need to show, yes, we are still here. And I think that they have a lot to prove.
I agree with that. I do want to say why I think they get more time than other rosters, and it's because they're bridging cultural divides and scene divides here, right? They brought in a coach from Korea, they brought in a player from Korea. Those are different philosophies that might take a little while to meld, and it's different communication that takes a while to meld. That's why personally I want to give them a little bit more time, but I also get both your point, which is that they've had some time, and they've also known that these were in changes for longer. These changes were coming for longer than the changes had actually been in action. So I don't know. I think that Cloud9 roster, I think Cloud9 as an org probably gives them a chance through the next Masters series if they missed out this time, but it's definitely going to put them in hot water. And if you don't see rapid improvement from that point on, I could see changes coming through. It's an interesting one. T1's the other big name, but I don't know. I'm kind of meh on T1 right now.
I can't even say that people are losing faith. I think it's at a point now where everyone's just like,
What are they?
T1.
What are they?
It is a
Yeah.
great chance, I think, for T1 or Cloud9 to sort of win back a bit of the trust of the community with how good they can be by
Yeah.
qualifying, because I think it's going to come down to both of these two teams, which would be one hell of a series.
It really would. It really would. I think we're going to wrap up our show there, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, we are live at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday to break down the esports news. We're also going to be, as I said before, doing a pre-show before each day of the challenges, both this weekend and next weekend. So be sure to tune in early so that you could get the lowdown on what's been going on and get ready for your favorite teams and your favorite matches. It's a pleasure as always. If you enjoyed the show, please do follow us, follow this channel, follow Nerd Street on Twitter to find out the next time the show is going live. It's always 1 p.m. EST. It's the secret. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.